Hello and welcome to Elvenhome, and to this edition where we take the window frames that you saw in the last episode and try to fit them into a design on the front of the building, and in which I respond to a particular request about glue and glaze. More of that later in the video. But first of all, let's get to where I was last weekend when finally in my head I'd worked out how I was going to design the front of the works. I'm filming this in the afternoon of the 18th of May, Sunday, and I have been thinking pretty much solidly since I've put up the last video, which was 2 Fridays ago now, about the design for the front of the works. I had some ideas floating around in my head, and I was really trying to get my head around what the whole thing would look like. And then it suddenly dawned on me about 4 or 5 days ago that the works are sitting opposite the engine shed. And I'll put a quick picture up here of the engine shed for those of you who don't immediately remember what it's like. And the design of the works would be pretty similar. Not exactly the same necessarily, but you would be able to see, I'm sure, a link between the two buildings. So that set me down a different path to the one that I'd been on. You may remember that the windows that I made in the last one, I said originally were going to be at the top and set out, there's four sets of them, along the cross with a gap in the middle for the footbridge that will come across from the depot into the works. And at about the same time as I realised it must look like the engine shed, is that I realised that these at the top are just the wrong place for them. They're too big, they're too tall, they just don't look right. And if anywhere, they're going to be down there. So those things coming together, I've been playing around with different thicknesses of strip styrene about how I might fashion the front of the works, and really today it started to come together. And before I get too far advanced, I thought I would show you where I've got to as I'm starting to construct at the moment just the lower half of the works. So if I remove this you'll recall probably going to be the back, the bit that will go up against the control panel. So I take that off out the way. On here is drawn the outline of that card. And what I've decided to do instead is to do this. Now I'll show you where we're going to. There we go, pop that in there. What I've put together is a combination of H-beam and I-beams. So if I just pull this piece of card off from here gently so I don't screw anything up. Okay. So what you have is the H-beam sitting so that the window frames sit into them. Now it is entirely possible for the structural engineers out there among you that the H-beam properly should be set that way. But these frames, although they're pretty accurate, are not absolutely die straight right the way across, either because of the odd lump of strip styrene or a bit thicker paint. And it is actually quite useful to hide the top of the frame in the H of the H-beam, because once you make the frame up, that is die straight, and it allows for any slight variations that there may be here. The variations are all less than a millimetre, much less than a millimetre, so they're not really a problem overall. It's just once you start trying to put straight edges across them that you can have a problem. It does also help me overcome the potential problem of light bleed, which is always a problem when you're scratch building, because of course light will shine through any gap that you leave. And I will be doing some things on the inside just to make sure that I don't have light bleed. I think some plastic putty will probably go around joints and it will be tested for light bleeding. but I want the light shining out of the windows, not the walls or the gaps in my imperfect scratch building. I was originally going to have the inserts in here come down to where they'll sit level with the baseboard, the top of the baseboard. But it occurred to me actually it would be much better to let the wall go on below the baseboard, which will give more of an impression of the building coming up as it would from the ground. And again, would also avoid any potential problems of light bleed underneath where I was building to. Now the only problem that gave me is that I then needed to create this piece of card and cut the notches out so that that can slide into the I-beam. And that now, when that slides in, and I was quite pleased with myself cutting these so that it did slide in, now sits level with where it will sit across the top of the wires coming out from the points. And the total distance is just right for where the landing stage will be into the building here. Now I've built this in, going to build this in two halves. So the H-beam that I've been playing around with is the other half over here, because that will also allow me, rather than trying to be precise here, I can go exactly the distance of card and paper that's needed to close that gap. Rather than trying to build across the whole thing in one go, it's just much easier to try and manipulate these things in two halves. And rather handily, when you put the brick card on top, the card is the same thickness as the flanges on the I-beam, hooray, so it fits flush with everything. And that also overcomes something that I was just beginning to worry about, which was that the frames, if they were sat proud of the building, would look odd. Because by and large, you don't have great big hefty window frames on the outside of the building. They tend to be set back. And this is giving a nice flush look, which is consistent with what's on the engine shed. So I'm going to, over the next day or so, finish building this half, the bottom half. The top half, I've managed to source from L-Cut Creative some rather nice windows. If I bring these up, I'll do a section a bit later on because I've bought one of virtually every window they do, not all, quite all. I'm really impressed with these. This 10 windows costs £1.29, and they're rather good, and they do some for a building that I'm still trying to work out how to build all the parts of, which will go on the underground layout, and more of that a bit later in the year. But these are rather good, I think, and I think they're going to sit rather nicely. The question in my mind at the moment is whether above each one of those there is one of these, or there is one between two. So there'll be 6 windows there and 3 above. I rather like the idea of the 3 above, because these are shining on a walkway that runs across here in my mind, because obviously the stairs have got to go somewhere, and there's a walkway that goes across there, goes over the top of the works, and then so workers can walk round without having to necessarily go under or through dangerous areas. That's where I've got to. I thought it was right to bring you up here now, rather than just suddenly say, aha, here it is. That's a lot of rambling, and this may be quite severely edited. But I'll come back when I've made the second half of this and settled in my mind what the top of the design bit is going to be. In response to the last video, one of the comments that came in from BNSF fan 01 was to do with the glue and glaze, and to ask if there was any of the older videos which showed me actually applying the glue and glaze. If you go back to videos 104 and 105, you will see me actually applying it when I made the engine shed, I think. And I think I did a time lapse a long time ago, possibly when I made the signal box, of glue and glaze drying. And even at about 40 seconds, that was 46 seconds too much of watching glue dry. However, I've never shown myself actually applying glue and glaze, partly I think because it wasn't easy to do. I didn't have the right setup to be able to film without either my head or my hands getting in the way. And I'm hoping that one or other of those will keep out the way here as I do it for one section of the windows that are in the frame. So this is the stuff, Deluxe Glue and Glaze. It's a kind of PVA, I think, basically, which is quite thick and dries clear. I think on the front it says crystal clear, which is putting it a bit high, but clear enough for what I want on here. And as you know, I really like the effect that this gives. So what I'm going to do is have a go at trying to do all these windows under the glare of the camera, which probably means I won't manage to get it to work on any of them, but we'll have a go. So what I do is I get some of the glue and glaze and just put it out a good dab of it. There we go, that should do. And the idea is gently to apply the glaze and drag it across here until you've filled in all the holes. That is the idea. Sometimes it works first time, sometimes you may have to go over several times. It is quite tricky sometimes when you're filling in the one window that hasn't taken it, not to pop other ones. But I'm going to shut up now and just work on these. And I have no I'm not going to show you the whole thing, but I will jump about as we're going through. But the first 2 or 3 windows I will do in real time, I hope. Well, that took less time than I feared. So I will go on and do the other one off camera, and I'll come back when these have dried. The last time you saw these was just under 4 hours ago. I completed the second one, which is this one, and in 1 or 2 places it's still just finishing drying. It was a bit thicker. It had gone through more thickly, and that has taken a bit longer to dry. This one has been clear for probably at least half an hour. And as you'll see, if I bring this, you can see it glinting. I have beautifully glazed windows. So the Glue and Glaze is a brilliant product, and I've used it many times. The only thing I would say, which I need to test out at some point, but which I won't be doing now, is on something like this, which is paper based and is really quite thin. It might be a bit too heavy. Because it's so wet, it might make these warp. So at some point I will have a test and I'll show you. It won't be in this video, but they may need to be glazed in the more usual way of just some clear perspex behind it, thin sheet perspex behind it. But that is how you use glue and glaze, for those of you that were interested. And I now have 2 of these beautifully glazed, so I'll go back to thinking about how I then stitch it all together. As you can see, I've stitched these together. In fact, it was pretty obvious how to stitch them together. The only thing I did have to do was to recut the long piece of card that ran under here. This was the one that was there that you saw in the last video, because I'd cut the slots too wide and the I-beam was just slipping through, and that isn't the idea. The idea is that the card goes within the flanges of the I-beam. And then it was just a case of sticking everything together. The piece here, as I said, I didn't cut that until I was absolutely sure what that distance needed to be. And that's all gone in really rather well. I'm also content. I've thought of a way of attaching it. If I bring this down, you'll see that this sits on a piece of 15mm wide wood. So that's 15mm there. That is 10mm there, which is exactly the distance that this now sits below the baseboard. So I think that will give quite a bit of rigidity, both in stopping this flopping frontwards and backwards, but also giving it a nice firm clear line to stick to as it sits below the baseboard. And at the end of the video I will show you in place, because I've had a look to see how it will sit, and it's already beginning to look quite good. So I'll show you that at the end of the video. I think I have decided for myself, let me just get this to stand up again. There we go. That I am only going to use 3 of these windows above each 6 of those, so a 2-to-1 ratio, and have those running along the top. And I think what I'm going to do is enclose the window between 2 sheets of either card, or possibly I've got some very thin styrene card, so that it provides the look of a windowsill and mullions for it to sit in. I'll see what it looks like, and when I do that, it won't be time for this video. I will make up a mock one to see whether it's going to work, and I can also use that as the opportunity to test whether the glue and glaze, once it's stuck between these 2 bits of card, whether that gives it enough rigidity for the glue and glaze to work, because it would be nice ideally for these to have the same glazing as the main windows. The only other thing I want to briefly touch on here is that in response to the last video, Phil Brown raised a question about whether the lamps, the building lamps that I showed you in the last video, really would be right for the period. And it's a valid point, because they are very white. So what I have done, now I'm hoping you can see this. It's quite tricky because the camera is of course trying to even the light out, but I've painted this one with yellow ochre, and if I show it on my finger, you may see that that's a yellow colour. Bring it a bit closer. It's more a yellow colour. And if I show that one, that is now the bright white. So that will give certainly a better look for the kind of incandescent lamp that I think for my time would have been there. I don't think it would be gas. Phil did ask, would it be a gas lamp? And I don't think so. Not by about the late 1940s on a building such as this. And I did have a problem, as I said to him, that most of the building lights that I saw I just didn't like. Except I thought possibly some of the Woodland Scenics just plug ones might have worked, but they're very expensive. And I don't really want to be using the just plug system, although some of their lights don't always have their plug on the end. But they were very expensive for what they were compared to these. I can't remember how much these cost me, but I got 10 in a packet for a lot less than I would have got just 2 lamps from Woodland Scenics. But I think the yellow is working. I think you can see the difference between the two. What I'm not sure about is how many of them I will use. As I said, I'm going to do 3 to 1 here. And I may either put a lamp above the center window, or I may have a sign here with some of these lamps sitting above it. Either way, it's just to give a bit of external light. So with that, let's go up on the layout where I can have some trains running round, and we can have a look at what this looks like with trains running past it. Once I've finished speaking here, I'll take some handheld shots to try and get a better view for you, and I'll put them on after the close, just before the credits come up. But that's where it's going to go. That's the bottom half, and you'll see that this is where the bridge will be, going through and landing about here. There's a nice big area here where the steps can land and come down to allow workers to go across from the works into the engine shed. The eventual height will be about this, I think, if I remember rightly from the other card. So that will give looking from this into this way, that will be the single biggest part. Here I think I'm going to put some low wall and 1 or 2 line side buildings. Still haven't made my mind up what I'm going to put along that side, but Ewan made a good point in his comments at the end of the last video from Blackwood, that maybe at that end I will make them removable, because that will help with getting shots when I use the both train cam, but also when I'm taking shots for running shots. So that, I think, about wraps up this edition. Very much a scratch building one, and I've definitely got the scratch building bug back again. I'd forgotten how much I really enjoy both the business of trying to work out in your head what it is that you're going to do, and doing some scratch building. So I shall be carrying on with getting that bit done, and I hope actually to have that finished now, because now that I've got in my head what the rest of the front looks like, the sides of course are going to be very straightforward, and then maybe for the next video, maybe I will have also built the bridge, because I've had the relevant pieces of plastruct arrive, which for what I have in mind as the design for the bridge. We'll see, and you'll see in the next video. That, I think, pretty much wraps it up for this edition. Thank you very much for watching, and if you've liked the video, please do give it a thumbs up. That's all very helpful, and if you haven't subscribed, please do subscribe, because it'd be great to have you along. And if you've got any comments on what I'm doing, please do let me have your comments. As you'll have heard, I find them just so helpful, and I say this every time because it's true. I'm just so grateful to everybody who subscribes, of course, but particularly everybody who comments, because so much of this layout exists because of people that commented, and I wouldn't have designed it in this way if I'd have been left to my own devices. In fact, if I'd have been left to my own devices, some of it would still not yet be finished. So with that, I'll leave you with some shots of the trains passing the the works, or such bit of the works as is currently built. And I'll speak to you again in about a fortnight's time. But that's bye-bye from me. Bye-bye.